Lost in an unforgiving mountain, surrounded by deadly mists, an elderly man and his faithful dog, on the brink of surrender, mysteriously encounter an enigmatic horse at the edge of despair, and the choice they will make in that instant will transform their lives in a way no one could ever imagine. Nestled in the heart of the Rockies, Serenity Mountain stood as a testament to nature's grandeur. Its majestic peaks, draped in a patchwork of emerald pines and rugged granite, pierced the azure sky. The air, crisp and laden with the scent of wild sage and mountain flowers, invigorated the senses of all who ventured into its domain. At the mountain's base, a quaint visitor center welcomed adventurers from around the world. Its rustic wooden architecture blended seamlessly with the surrounding landscape, its windows reflecting the golden hues of the early morning sun. A weathered sign, etched with trail maps and safety guidelines, stood sentinel at the trailhead, a silent guardian for those about to embark on their journey. The trail itself began innocuously enough, a well-worn path of packed earth and scattered pebbles that wound its way through a meadow dotted with vibrant wildflowers. But as it ascended, the path narrowed, becoming a ribbon of challenges that tested even the most seasoned hikers. Twisted roots and jutting rocks created natural obstacles, while steep inclines demanded respect and caution from all who dared to climb. As the elevation increased, the vegetation changed. The lush, deciduous trees of the lower slopes gave way to hardy evergreens, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers against the thinning air. Glimpses of the valley below peeked through clearings, offering breathtaking vistas that rewarded those who braved the ascent. Yet, Serenity Mountain was as mercurial as it was beautiful. Weather patterns could shift in the blink of an eye, transforming a clear day into a misty enigma. It was a place of wonder and warning, of beauty and beast, a true wilderness that demanded respect from all who sought to explore its secrets. As the sun crept over the eastern ridge of Serenity Mountain, casting long shadows across the visitor center parking lot, a weathered pickup truck rumbled to a stop. Out stepped John, a seasoned hiker in his late 60s, his silver hair peeking out from beneath a well-worn forest ranger hat. His face, etched with laugh lines and sun-kissed wrinkles, bore the marks of a life lived outdoors. John's eyes, a striking blue that mirrored the mountain sky, sparkled with anticipation for the day's adventure. With practiced ease, John reached into the truck bed and lifted out his backpack, its patches and scuffs telling tales of countless trails conquered. As he shouldered the pack, a blur of golden fur bounded from the passenger seat. Max, John's loyal golden retriever, hit the ground running, his tail wagging with unbridled enthusiasm. Max was no ordinary hiking companion. His intelligent brown eyes seemed to understand every word John spoke, and his muscular build spoke of a dog bred for the outdoors. A red bandana tied loosely around his neck added a touch of adventure to his appearance, matching the spirit that radiated from his every movement. John knelt down, his knees creaking slightly to ruffle Max's ears. "Ready for another big day, old boy?" he asked, his voice gravelly yet warm. Max responded with a happy bark, spinning in a circle as if to say, "Let's go already." John paused at the trailhead sign, his weathered hands tracing the map as he explained their route to Max. "We're taking the Ridge Trail today, buddy. It's a bit more challenging, but the views are worth it." Max sat attentively, his ears perked forward, as if he understood every word. As they began their ascent, John's movements were deliberate and steady. Years of experience had taught him to respect the mountain's challenges. His sturdy hiking boots gripped the uneven terrain with each step, while his walking stick provided extra support. Despite his age, John moved with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the wilderness. Max trotted alongside, occasionally ranging ahead to investigate an interesting scent or sound, but always circling back to check on John. The dog's keen senses were attuned to the environment, alert for any potential dangers. His golden coat shimmered in the dappled sunlight, filtering through the trees, a warm contrast to the cool greens and greys of the forest. The pair's synchronicity was evident in their seamless navigation of the trail's obstacles. When John slowed to navigate a particularly tricky section, Max instinctively matched his pace. At water breaks, Max would patiently wait as John refilled their water bottle from clear mountain streams, accepting his share with grateful laps. Their communication transcended words. A subtle hand gesture from John would send Max investigating a nearby thicket, while a soft whine from Max could alert John to approaching hikers or wildlife. This wordless dialogue, honed over years of companionship, spoke volumes about their deep bond and mutual reliance. As John and Max rounded a bend in the trail, the atmosphere suddenly shifted. A thick, ghostly mist began to roll in, enveloping the mountainside with alarming speed. The once clear path ahead disappeared into a wall of white, obscuring familiar landmarks and muffling the ambient sounds of the forest. John's brow furrowed with concern. "This wasn't in the forecast, Max," he muttered, reaching for his GPS device. To his dismay, the screen flickered and went dark, the dense fog apparently interfering with the signal. The trail markers, usually visible every few hundred feet, were now completely hidden from view. Max's demeanor changed, his tail lowering and his ears pricking up alertly. He let out a low whine, sensing his master's unease. John patted the dog's head reassuringly, but his own confidence was shaken. "Looks like we're in a pickle, boy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As they cautiously moved forward, the fog seemed to thicken with each step. The familiar contours of the trail began to blur, merging with the surrounding wilderness. John and Max found themselves in an otherworldly landscape, where every direction looked the same, a disorienting sea of swirling grey. As the fog closed in around them, John's years of experience kicked into high gear. He took a deep breath, calming his racing heart. "All right, Max," he said softly. "We've been in tight spots before. We'll get through this one too." His voice, though tinged with concern, carried a reassuring steadiness that seemed to calm Max as well. John's mind raced through his extensive knowledge of wilderness survival. He knew that in situations like this, panic was the enemy. With deliberate movements, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a compass. "Technology may fail us, boy, but good old-fashioned tools never let us down," he murmured, more to himself than to Max. As John tried to orient himself using the compass, Max's behavior began to change. The dog's nose worked overtime, sniffing the air intently. His ears swiveled, catching sounds that were imperceptible to John's human ears. There was an intensity in Max's demeanor that John had rarely seen before. John watched his canine companion closely, years of trust allowing him to read the subtle changes in Max's body language. "What is it, boy? You sensing something?" he asked, his voice low and curious. The bond between man and dog was never more apparent than in this moment of crisis. John, despite his years of hiking experience, found himself relying heavily on Max's keener senses. He realized that their partnership went far beyond that of a man and his pet. They were a team, each bringing their unique strengths to navigate this challenging situation. As they stood there, enveloped in the thick fog, John made a decision. "All right, Max," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "I'm going to trust your instincts. You lead the way, boy." As they moved forward, John's mind wandered to the countless hikes they had shared over the years. He remembered Max as a boisterous puppy, full of energy and curiosity, learning the ways of the trail. Now, watching the confident and focused dog leading the way, John felt a surge of pride and affection. The fog seemed to amplify every sound, from the crunch of their footsteps on the rocky path to the occasional drip of moisture from the trees. John found himself hyper-aware of his surroundings, straining his senses to gather any information that might help them navigate. He noticed how Max's ears twitched at every sound, how his nose worked tirelessly, sifting through the damp air for familiar scents. Despite the gravity of their situation, John couldn't help but marvel at Max's unwavering focus and determination. The dog moved with purpose, occasionally pausing to reassure himself of the scent trail he was following, then pressing on with renewed vigor. As they continued their uncertain journey, John's thoughts turned to the deep bond he shared with Max. It wasn't just about the hikes or the companionship, it was about trust, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding that had grown between them over the years. In this moment of vulnerability, John realized just how much he relied on Max, not just as a hiking partner, but as a true friend. The mist swirled around them, creating ghostly shapes that seemed to morph and change with each step. John found himself grateful for Max's solid presence, an anchor of reality in this surreal landscape. He chuckled softly to himself, thinking how ironic it was that in this moment of being lost, he felt more connected to Max than ever before. "We're quite a pair, aren't we, boy?" John murmured, his voice barely audible above the muffled sounds of the foggy forest. Max's ear twitched in response, and he let out a soft woof, as if in agreement. As John and Max pressed on through the dense fog, the terrain beneath their feet began to change. The once familiar trail gave way to unfamiliar, treacherous ground. Sharp rocks jutted out unexpectedly, threatening to trip them at every step. Slick patches of moss-covered stone created treacherous footing, forcing John to rely heavily on his walking stick for balance. The temperature dropped noticeably, the damp chill seeping through John's layers of clothing. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. "Getting a bit nippy, eh, Max?" he said, his breath visible in the cold air. Max whined softly in response, his own coat providing little protection against the increasing cold. As they navigated the challenging terrain, the fog seemed to play tricks on their senses. Shadows loomed and retreated, creating the illusion of movement in the periphery of their vision. Strange echoes bounced off unseen surfaces, distorting familiar sounds into eerie, unrecognizable noises. John found himself constantly on edge, his nerves frayed by the otherworldly atmosphere. Suddenly, Max froze, his body tensing and a low growl rumbling in his throat. John immediately halted, trusting his companion's instincts. Through the mist, a dark shape moved, barely visible but unmistakably present. John's heart raced as he tried to identify the potential threat. Was it a bear, a mountain lion, or merely a trick of the fog? As they stood motionless, the shape drew nearer. John's hand tightened on his walking stick, ready to defend himself and Max if necessary. The tension was palpable, the only sounds their rapid breathing and Max's continuous low growl. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the shape vanished into the mist. John and Max remained frozen for several long moments, straining their senses for any sign of danger. When nothing further materialized, they cautiously resumed their journey, but with a heightened sense of alertness. The incident left them both shaken, adding a new layer of stress to their already precarious situation. John found himself constantly scanning their surroundings, jumping at every shadow and sound. Max, too, seemed more on edge, his ears constantly swiveling and his tail held low. As they continued, the path began to slope upward sharply. The incline, combined with the slippery conditions, made each step a challenge. John's legs burned with the effort, and he could hear Max panting heavily beside him. The fog, if anything, seemed to thicken, reducing visibility to mere feet in front of them. "We've got to find shelter, Max," John muttered, his voice strained with exertion. "We can't keep going like this much longer." But in every direction, there was nothing but swirling grey mist and the vague outlines of trees and rocks. The mountain that John knew so well had become an alien landscape, full of hidden dangers and devoid of comfort. As they pushed forward, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. The path narrowed, hugging the side of a steep cliff that disappeared into the misty abyss below. John's heart pounded in his chest as he inched along the precarious ledge, one hand pressed against the damp rock face for support, the other gripping his walking stick with white-knuckled intensity. Max, usually agile and sure-footed, whimpered softly as he navigated the narrow path. The dog's discomfort only added to John's anxiety. "Easy does it, boy," John murmured, his voice barely audible over the howling wind that had picked up, threatening to push them off balance. Suddenly, a section of the path crumbled beneath John's feet. He stumbled, his heart leaping into his throat as he felt himself start to fall. In a flash, Max was there, his teeth gently but firmly clamping onto John's sleeve, providing just enough stability for John to regain his footing. Breathing heavily, John patted Max's head, silently thanking him for the quick save. The close call left them both shaken, but there was no choice but to keep moving. The wind continued to intensify, driving icy particles of moisture into their faces. The temperature dropped further, and John could feel the cold seeping into his bones. His fingers, numb with cold, fumbled as he tried to zip his jacket higher. As they rounded a bend, they were met with a new obstacle. A recent rockslide had left a gaping hole in the path, far too wide to jump across. On one side, the sheer rock face stretched upwards, disappearing into the fog. On the other, a steep drop-off vanished into the misty void below. Just as John was considering the dangerous option of trying to climb around the gap, a sound caught their attention. It was faint at first, barely audible over the wind, but it grew clearer, the sound of hooves on stone. Out of the mist emerged a magnificent horse, its coat a rich chestnut brown that seemed to glow even in the dim light. The horse stood on the other side of the gap, its intelligent eyes fixed on John and Max. There was something in its gaze that spoke of understanding, of purpose. John and Max stood transfixed, hardly daring to breathe. The horse pawed the ground, then turned and began to move along the cliff face, following a path that had been invisible to John. It paused, looking back at them as if beckoning them to follow. "What do you think, Max?" John asked, a note of wonder in his voice. Max barked once, his tail wagging slightly for the first time since they'd gotten lost. The decision was made. With renewed determination, John and Max began to carefully make their way towards where the horse was waiting, ready to follow this mysterious guide into the unknown. With cautious optimism, John and Max began to follow the mysterious horse. The animal moved with surprising grace along the treacherous mountainside, picking out a path that was invisible to John's eyes. As they progressed, John noticed that the route the horse was taking, while not easy, was far more manageable than their previous path. "Well, I'll be," John muttered in amazement, carefully placing his feet where the horse had stepped. "This fella seems to know what he's doing, eh, Max?" As they moved, John's mind raced with questions. Where had this horse come from? How did it survive up here on its own? And most importantly, did it really understand their predicament? Or was this all just a fortunate coincidence? The horse led them away from the sheer cliffs and onto a slightly wider trail. Though still shrouded in mist, this new path felt more solid underfoot, allowing John to relax his death grip on his walking stick. He noticed that the wind had died down as well, replaced by an almost eerie calm. Every so often the horse would pause, turning its head to ensure that John and Max were still following. There was an unmistakable intelligence in its eyes that both unnerved and reassured John. He'd always believed in the deep connection between humans and animals, but this experience was pushing the boundaries of what he thought possible. As they continued their journey, John found himself talking to the horse, much as he did with Max. "You're quite the trail guide, aren't you?" he said, his voice filled with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. The horse nickered softly in response, as if acknowledging the compliment. Max, not to be outdone, would occasionally bark encouragingly at the horse, seemingly trying to communicate in his own way. The interaction between the two animals fascinated John, who watched as they developed a sort of unspoken understanding. As they pressed on, following their equine guide, the fog began to thin ever so slightly. John could make out more of their surroundings, and a spark of recognition flickered in his mind. Though still disoriented, he started to feel that they were moving in the right direction. The horse led them to a small clearing where a stream trickled over moss-covered rocks. John realized how parched he was and gratefully knelt to refill his water bottle. Max lapped eagerly at the cool water, while the horse dipped its muzzle into the stream, for a long drink. This brief respite allowed John to assess their situation. His muscles ached from the strain of the treacherous hike, and the chill had settled deep into his bones. Yet, the presence of the horse had infused him with a renewed sense of hope. He found himself marveling at the unexpected turn of events. "You know, Max," John said, his voice low and contemplative, "I've hiked these trails for decades, but I've never experienced anything quite like this." Max looked up from the stream, cocking his head as if in agreement. As they prepared to move on, John noticed the horse watching him intently. There was an almost human-like patience in its gaze, as if it understood the need for this short break. John approached the animal slowly, hand outstretched. To his surprise, the horse allowed him to stroke its neck gently. Their journey resumed, but now there was a palpable shift in the dynamic between the three of them. No longer was it just John and Max following a mysterious horse. They had become a team, each playing a crucial role in their shared quest for safety. Max, energized by the rest and water, took on the role of rear guard, constantly checking behind them and alerting to any potential dangers. John, his confidence bolstered, began to recognize more landmarks, confirming that they were indeed heading towards familiar territory, and the horse, steady and sure, continued to lead the way, picking out the safest path through the challenging terrain. As they navigated a particularly tricky section of loose scree, John found himself marveling at the unexpected bonds forged in the face of adversity. Here he was, a seasoned hiker, relying on the instincts of his dog and the guidance of a wild horse. It was a humbling experience, one that was reshaping his understanding of the connection between humans and animals. As the unlikely trio continued their descent, the fog began to lift, revealing glimpses of the vast landscape around them. However, with improved visibility came a stark realization. They were in an area of Serenity Mountain that John had never explored before. The terrain was rougher, wilder, and far more treacherous than anything they had encountered so far. Ahead of them loomed a narrow ridge, barely wide enough for single-file passage. On one side, a sheer cliff face stretched upwards, while on the other, a steep drop-off disappeared into a misty abyss. The horse, still leading the way, stepped onto the ridge without hesitation, its hooves finding purchase on the unstable ground. John felt his heart rate spike as he observed the perilous path before them. "Easy now," he murmured, as much to himself as to Max and the horse. With a deep breath, he stepped onto the ridge, one hand trailing along the cliff face for support, the other gripping his walking stick tightly. Max whined softly, clearly sensing the danger. The dog pressed close to John's legs, his usual boundless energy replaced by cautious, deliberate movements. The three of them inched along the narrow path, each step a calculated risk. Halfway across the ridge, disaster struck. A section of the path crumbled beneath John's feet, sending a shower of rocks tumbling into the void below. John stumbled, his walking stick clattering away as he desperately scrabbled for purchase on the disintegrating edge. In that moment of terror, Max sprang into action. The dog lunged forward, clamping his jaws onto John's jacket sleeve, but Max alone wasn't enough to counter John's momentum. As both man and dog teetered on the brink, the horse whinnied loudly and moved with astonishing agility. Spinning around in the narrow space, the horse lowered its head and pressed its strong neck against John's chest, effectively sandwiching him between Max and itself. The combined effort of dog and horse halted John's fall, holding him steady as loose rocks continued to rain down into the abyss. For several heart-stopping seconds, they remained frozen in this life-saving tableau. John, his breath coming in short gasps, clung to Max's collar with one hand and gripped the horse's mane with the other. The sheer drop was inches from his heels, a stark reminder of how close he had come to disaster. As the immediate danger passed, the reality of their situation set in. They were trapped on a crumbling ledge, the path behind them unstable and the way forward uncertain. The fog, which had been lifting, seemed to close in again, adding to the sense of isolation and peril. John looked from Max to the horse, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared understanding. They had saved his life, but they weren't out of danger yet. As the ledge beneath them gave an ominous creak, John realized that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The precarious ledge continued to shift beneath them, small pebbles and dust cascading down the cliff face. John's mind raced, searching for a solution. They couldn't go back. The path behind them had partially collapsed. Moving forward seemed equally treacherous, with no guarantee that the remaining section of the ridge would hold their weight. "Steady, boys," John whispered, his voice barely audible over the ominous creaking of rock. The horse's ears flicked back at the sound, while Max whined softly, his body trembling against John's leg. With agonizing slowness, John began to edge sideways along the cliff face, pressing his back firmly against the rock. "Come on, Max," he encouraged, and the dog obediently followed, mirroring John's cautious movements. The horse, seemingly understanding the gravity of the situation, remained perfectly still, providing a stable anchor point. Every inch felt like a mile as they inched along the crumbling ledge. John's fingers scraped raw from the rough rock, searched desperately for any handhold. His legs burned with the effort of maintaining balance on the narrow path. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. A section of the ledge just a few feet ahead began to give way. John froze, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. There was nowhere to go. They were trapped between the collapsing section ahead and the unstable path behind. In this moment of sheer panic, the horse made a decision. With a loud whinny that echoed off the cliff walls, it began to move forward, directly towards the crumbling section. John watched in horror, certain he was about to witness the noble animal plummet to its death. But the horse had a plan. As it reached the breaking point, it reared up on its hind legs, bringing its front hooves down with tremendous force on the unstable rock. The impact sent shockwaves through the ledge, causing the weakened section to break away completely, but also revealing a more solid layer of rock underneath. The horse's actions had cleared a path, but the danger was far from over. The newly exposed section was barely wide enough for them to pass, and there was no telling how stable it would be. The horse moved first, stepping carefully onto the new path. John held his breath, watching for any sign that the rock might give way, but it held firm under the horse's weight. Encouraged, John followed, with Max pressed close to his side. As they neared the end of the treacherous section, hope began to bloom in John's chest, but fate had one more challenge in store. Just as safety seemed within reach, the rock beneath Max's hind paws suddenly crumbled. In that heart-stopping moment, as Max's hind legs scrabbled for purchase on the crumbling edge, time seemed to stand still. John, acting on pure instinct, lunged for his faithful companion, his hands grasping Max's collar. But the sudden movement threatened to upset his own precarious balance. Just as it seemed both man and dog would plummet into the abyss, the horse made an astonishing move. With incredible dexterity, it maneuvered its body to create a barrier, pressing John and Max against the cliff face. Using its own body as a shield, the horse prevented their fall while simultaneously providing them with the stability needed to regain their footing. As John steadied himself and pulled Max to safety, he looked at the horse with newfound wonder. This was no ordinary animal. The intelligence in its eyes, the purposefulness of its actions, spoke of something beyond mere animal instinct. Once they were all on stable ground, the horse stepped back, allowing John and Max some space. It was then that John noticed something he had overlooked in the chaos of their journey: a weathered leather band around the horse's neck, nearly hidden by its mane. With trembling fingers, John reached out and gently moved the horse's mane aside. There, stamped into the leather, was a faded insignia, the logo of Serenity Mountain National Park. Beneath it, barely legible, were the words, "Scout, Park, Ranger Mount." The realization hit John like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just any horse, it was a trained ranger mount, likely separated from its rider during a patrol. The horse's uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous mountain terrain, its intuitive understanding of their predicament, suddenly made sense. At the sound of its name, the horse, Scout, nickered softly, pressing its muzzle gently against John's shoulder. The gesture felt like both a confirmation and a comfort. This revelation changed everything. John's mind raced with the implications. Scout wasn't just a chance encounter, he was a trained professional, as much a part of the mountain's rescue team as any human ranger. The horse's actions, from finding them in the fog to navigating the treacherous paths, had been deliberate, informed by years of training and experience. As if sensing John's epiphany, Scout gently nudged him forward. The horse's demeanor had subtly shifted. There was now an air of assured competence about him, as if he knew they were on the home stretch and was eager to complete his mission. Max, who had been watching this interaction intently, approached Scout with newfound respect. The two animals touched noses in a moment of mutual understanding, cementing the bond forged through their shared ordeal. As they rounded a final bend, the Serenity Mountain Ranger Station came into view, its sturdy wooden structure a welcome sight after their harrowing journey. John could see figures moving about, park rangers alerted to their presence by Scout's distinctive whinny. Overwhelmed by emotion, John dropped to his knees, wrapping one arm around Max and the other around Scout's strong leg. "We made it," he whispered, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down his weathered cheeks. "We actually made it." As the rangers rushed to meet them, John marveled at the extraordinary chain of events that had led to their rescue. What had started as a routine hike had turned into a profound lesson about the intelligence of animals, the unexpected heroes in our midst, and the deep bonds that can form between species in the face of adversity. Scout stood tall and proud, his mission accomplished. In that moment, John knew that his life and his understanding of the mountain he thought he knew so well would never be the same again. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice filled with concern, "we've been searching for you for hours. Are you all right?" As John recounted their harrowing journey, the other rangers listened in awe. They marveled at Scout's intelligence and determination, and at the unlikely trio's ability to overcome the mountain's challenges together. While the rangers checked John and Max for injuries, Scout stood nearby, alert and watchful. It was clear that despite weeks alone on the mountain, his training and sense of duty had remained intact. "What happens now?" John asked, his voice betraying his emotional attachment to Scout. "What will happen to him?" John nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and a tinge of sadness. He had grown attached to Scout during their ordeal, and the thought of parting ways was unexpectedly difficult. John's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "I'd be honored," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I'm not as young as I used to be. Are you sure I'd be suitable?" As they discussed the details, Max sat patiently by John's side, while Scout remained close, occasionally nudging John's arm as if encouraging him to accept the offer. "All right," John said finally, a smile breaking across his weathered face. "Count me in. It seems Scout here isn't done with me yet." In the days that followed, John found himself experiencing a whirlwind of emotions as he settled into his new role at Serenity Mountain National Park. The memory of their harrowing adventure remained vivid, but it was now tinged with a sense of purpose and renewed vitality. During his first visit to the park stables, John was greeted by an enthusiastic whinny from Scout. The horse's eyes seemed to light up at the sight of him, and John felt a lump form in his throat. As he approached, Scout lowered his head, allowing John to stroke his muzzle gently. The park's head veterinarian, Dr. Lisa Chen, watched their interaction with interest. "It's remarkable," she commented. "Scout has always been a good-natured horse, but I've never seen him form such a strong bond so quickly. What you two went through together clearly left a lasting impact." John nodded, unable to find words to express the depth of his feelings. He thought back to those tense moments on the mountain, how Scout's steadfast presence had been a beacon of hope in their darkest hour. "Indeed. You know," John said, pausing in his brushing, "I've always felt a connection to this mountain. But now it's like I'm seeing it through new eyes, and it's all thanks to this magnificent animal." As the weeks passed, John's involvement with the park's animal program deepened. He found himself spending more and more time at the stables, not just with Scout, but with the other rescue animals as well. His experience and calm demeanor made him a natural with the horses, and he soon became an invaluable member of the team. One sunny afternoon, as John was leading Scout back from a training exercise, he caught sight of Max waiting patiently by the stable gates. The dog's tail wagged furiously at the sight of his master and his new equine friend. The lead ranger, Sarah, approached with a warm smile. "John, I can't tell you how much of a difference you've made here," she said. "Your dedication to Scout and the other animals, your willingness to share your mountain knowledge with our younger rangers, it's been incredible." As if to emphasize the point, Scout gently nudged John's shoulder while Max leaned against his leg. John looked at the two animals, then out at the majestic peaks of Serenity Mountain in the distance. He felt a profound sense of belonging, of being exactly where he was meant to be. As the sun began to set over Serenity Mountain, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, John stood at the edge of the ranger station's observation deck. Scout was tethered nearby, contentedly munching on some hay, while Max sat dutifully at John's feet. The three of them formed a picture of harmony, man, dog, and horse, united by their shared experience and mutual respect. John's gaze swept over the familiar yet somehow new landscape before him. The peaks and valleys that had once been merely scenic vistas now held deeper meaning. Each crag and crevice told a story of survival, of unexpected friendships, and of the indomitable spirit of both humans and animals. He thought about the incredible journey that had led him here, from a routine hike gone wrong to becoming an integral part of the park's rescue team. The fear and uncertainty of that fateful day had transformed into a profound appreciation for the delicate balance between humans and nature, and the unexpected ways in which animals could touch and change human lives. As if sensing his reflective mood, Scout lifted his head and nickered softly. John walked over and stroked the horse's mane, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Max wagged his tail in agreement, and Scout gently bumped his nose against John's shoulder. In that moment, surrounded by the majesty of the mountain and the companionship of his unlikely animal friends, John felt a deep sense of peace and belonging. He realized that his love for the mountain hadn't diminished. It had grown, deepened, and taken on new meaning. This wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. With Scout and Max by his side and the support of his new park family, John looked forward to the adventures that lay ahead, ready to face whatever challenges the mountain might bring. As the last rays of sunlight gilded the peaks, John smiled, feeling truly at home. "Come on, boys," he said warmly to Max and Scout. "Let's head back. We've got a big day tomorrow. There's always more to learn from this old mountain." As weeks turned into months, John's role at Serenity Mountain National Park evolved beyond his initial volunteer position. His unique bond with Scout and his wealth of mountain knowledge made him an invaluable asset to the park's rescue operations and educational programs. John, Max, and Scout became a familiar sight on the mountain trails. Their teamwork during training exercises and real rescue missions became legendary among the park staff and regular hikers. John's stories of their fateful adventure inspired visitors and reminded everyone of the unpredictable nature of the wilderness and the importance of respecting it. The park saw an increase in volunteers for its animal program, inspired by John's transformation from a solitary hiker to a crucial member of the mountain community. His experience served as a powerful reminder of the healing power of nature and the unexpected ways in which animals can impact human lives. Years later, John, now in his mid-70s, still volunteered at the park. Though he no longer participated in active rescues, his wisdom and experience continued to guide younger rangers. Scout, now retired, spent his days in a spacious paddock near the ranger station, always perking up at the sight of his old friend John and the ever-faithful Max. Serenity Mountain's story reminds us of the profound connections possible between humans and animals. Whether it's adopting a pet, volunteering at a local shelter, or supporting wildlife conservation efforts, there are countless ways to experience the joy and growth that comes from bonding with animals. What unexpected animal friendship might be waiting for you?